My name is Lucas. My job at the library isn't the most exciting in the world, but it provides a steady income, and I've always loved books. However, recent events have made me rethink my feelings about this place. It all started a few weeks ago when I received a call from our library director, Mr. Tom. He asked me to stay late to help with the inventory of new arrivals. The library was old, with massive wooden shelves and heavy velvet curtains on the windows. It was always a bit gloomy, even during the day. When I arrived in the evening, Mr. Tom was already there. He seemed a bit nervous, but I didn't pay much attention to it. We were sorting books onto the shelves, checking lists, and talking about various small things. It seemed like it would be an ordinary night. Around midnight, Mr. Tom decided to leave, leaving me alone. I continued working when I suddenly heard a faint rustling sound somewhere between the shelves. At first, I thought it was a mouse, but the sound repeated, becoming louder and clearer. I felt a slight chill down my spine but decided to ignore it. As I continued working, I noticed the lights in the library began to flicker. The bulbs would dim and then brighten again, creating a strange and eerie atmosphere. I grabbed a flashlight and decided to check if everything was all right with the electricity. Walking through the rows of shelves, I didn't find anything suspicious, but the rustling didn't stop. It seemed to follow me. Returning to my desk, I noticed that one of the books I had just placed on the shelf was again on the floor. It was an old dusty book that seemed like no one had opened it in years. I picked it up and opened the first page. It had the author's name, but the ink had somehow blurred, making the letters indecipherable. Suddenly, I heard a voice, quiet and whispering. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to hide my anxiety. No one answered, but the rustling grew louder and came closer to me. I felt my heart beat faster and decided it was best to check the entire library. Maybe it was just a trick of light and shadows, or maybe someone decided to prank me. Walking between the shelves, I felt the walls closing in around me. The space was becoming narrower and darker. I tried to find the source of the sound, but it seemed omnipresent. A shadow I saw out of the corner of my eye made me freeze in place. I turned around but saw nothing. At that moment, when I returned to my desk, the lights went out again. Only the beam of my flashlight pierced the thick darkness. I felt a cold breath on my neck. Something or someone was here with me. I quickly dialed Mr. Tom's number, but the call wouldn't go through. Panic began to take hold of me. Deciding that the best thing would be to leave the library and come back in the morning, I moved toward the exit, but the doors were locked. I distinctly remembered not locking them. While searching for the key, I heard the whisper again. This time it was clearer and more distinct. "You shouldn't have opened that book," the voice said. I turned and saw a shadow on the wall moving towards me. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The light from the flashlight suddenly went out, leaving me in complete darkness. "Do you know why this library is empty at night?" whispered the voice ever closer. "This place is cursed." I felt something cold and sticky touch my hand. I tried to fight it off, but my movements were paralyzed. The feeling of helplessness and fear overwhelmed me completely. When I finally found the key, I managed to open the door and ran outside. The cold night wind bit my face, but I was glad to be out. I looked back and saw the library standing quietly and darkly, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I returned but didn't dare tell Mr. Tom about everything that had happened. He just looked at me suspiciously and said he no longer needed my help on night shifts. Since then, I no longer stay at the library at night, but sometimes when I walk past its doors, I feel something where someone watching me from the darkness between the shelves. And I know I will never forget that night when the shadows came to life. We moved to a new town when I was 6. Any memories before that move I consider to be very early childhood, and a lot of those memories are blurry at this point. This is one of those memories. This happened at some age before 6. If I had to guess, I was 5. There was the local town library that our mom would always take my brothers and me to. It was a few blocks away. Actually, I remember this one day. It was my mom and my little brother, who was a toddler at this point. We started the day at the mall, probably spent hours there tagging along with our mom shopping. Whenever we'd go to this mall, she'd always bring us to the inside the mall to get us ice cream cones. I remember we got ice cream on this particular day because on the way to the library after leaving the mall, I still had some of the cone left in my hand. We arrived at the library, and there was this kids' computer section that my mom would let me stay at and play computer games while she went and did whatever she'd do. When I got bored of playing whatever old online computer games there were at the time, I got up and started walking through the aisles of books in the kids' section of the library, looking for the books. The kids' section was in the far corner of the library, and while I was walking from aisle to aisle, I heard a peep from behind me. I turned around and saw nothing. I was looking at the back wall of the library, which had another shelf of books leaning on it. Then I saw half of a grown man's face peer around the shelf and say, "Peekaboo." I remember laughing and feeling no sense of danger. He did it again. He went back behind the shelf, then peered out his head again and said, "Peekaboo," again. I laughed. He asked me what I was looking for, and I said the books. He said he'd help me find them. He came over and took my hand and started leading me through the aisles, leading us, I guess, to the section of books that began with the letter I. And there they were, at least 5 I Spy books next to each other. I grabbed my favorite one, the treasure hunt one, and he said, "Let's go sit down and play." He led me to a table in the corner by a couple of children's computers, and we started looking through the pictures. This went on for some time, and he was asking me questions about myself as we played I Spy. The question that still sticks out to me the most is, "Who are you here with?" And I told him, "My mom and little brother." At some point after this, he said something implying that there's a kids' playroom downstairs. I, at that age, never knew that there was a downstairs to the library. He said we could take the book down there. He led me to the door that led to the basement of the library, which, for reference, is actually where events and meetings for certain clubs and organizations are held, and there is actually a little playroom down there, I guess for parents who have to bring their kids with them during any of the meetings. The man led me to that little playroom. There were various toys in there, most notably a Lego set and a Lego table, and then there were a bunch of chairs. He set the I Spy book down on the Lego table. This is where things get really uncomfortable thinking back on it, as he was trying to forcibly get me to play with the toys. I started to get uncomfortable, and around this time, over the loudspeaker, a female librarian said into the intercom, "Will John come to the front, please? Your mother is looking for you." At this time, the man went to turn off the lights in the room, and now it was pitch black inside. He said in the dark, "We're going to play hide and seek." This was the first moment I was genuinely freaked out, and I started to yell for my mom. I remember he kept telling me to be quiet, and his voice was getting louder as he was getting closer to me in the dark until he had his hands on me. I thankfully managed to run past him and out the door of that room. I ran down the dark hallway back to the stairs. As I was running up the stairs, I had that same childhood feeling of running up the basement stairs after turning off the lights, only 100 times worse because I genuinely was scared I was going to be grabbed. I made it back to the main floor of the library and ran straight to the front desk, calling for my mom. She was at the front desk with a group of librarians, and I remember the relief on my mom's face when she saw me. I told her there was some man who took me downstairs, and she literally lost it. The next thing I remember from there was a bunch of police in the building searching around, but I never saw that man again. He must have exited the building through a different way. I remember speaking to some woman who was probably with the police, asking me very delicate questions. I never really asked my mom about this experience that many times because it's very uncomfortable, and I'd rather just not think of it. I'm a librarian. This is something that happened a few years ago at the library that I used to work at. This library was pretty close to my apartment, so close that occasionally I would walk to and from work. Now, it was about a 15-minute walk, so I only really did this when the weather was nice or if I wanted extra exercise or just felt like it. The library that I worked in I would describe as pretty average-sized. It was not that small, but also not too large. I really enjoyed it for the most part. Well, one night I was working until the time we closed at 8 p.m. I had walked to work that day, so I would be walking back as well. Things quieted down in the library significantly in the last hour that we were open. By the time 8 p.m. rolled around, I was the only person there. I then went over, I locked the doors and then went around the library, making sure that everything was in order. After that, I was able to leave. I started walking home, which would be on several different sidewalks. Normally, when I would walk home after a closing shift, I would be the only person on the sidewalk for most of the way. It really wasn't that common of an area for people to walk, especially at night. But on this night, literally within the first minute, I heard somebody walking behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw a hooded man wearing a gray sweatshirt trailing me a ways back. Instantly, I was nervous, and I didn't want to cause myself to panic or anything. I told myself that it was fine. But as I kept walking, the man remained behind me. When I turned, he did as well. I remember at that point I took a wrong turn intentionally onto a different road that was sort of out of my way. The man behind me did the same thing. Then, at the end of that block, I turned back and reconnected with the road that we had been on. The man still did the same thing. At that point, it confirmed to me that he was following me intentionally. This made me really nervous. I also realized that I had not brought my pepper spray with me to work. Normally, when I walk to work, I do, but I forgot on this day, which was bad luck. So I kept walking back home, and the man remained the same distance back. Soon, though, I reached a McDonald's restaurant. Never in my life was I so happy to see one. They were open, and I walked inside. When I did, the man did not go in but seemed to stop somewhere in the parking lot. After going in, I waited and texted my friend Mina. I told her of the situation and asked her to come and pick me up. She agreed, and luckily she lived very close to me, so within 5 minutes, she had arrived. I quickly left the restaurant and went into her car. We drove away, and I did not notice the man when we left. But luckily, I made it back home safely. After that, I didn't walk to work for a while, but that's not the last I saw of the man. This was probably almost a week later, and I was working another closing shift. I was behind the counter where I would usually work. From my view, I could see several bookshelves as well as some of the computers that we had. I remember at about 7:30 p.m., the library had become very quiet. I had only noticed a couple of people here and there, and some had left. Then I casually looked around and noticed that the same man who had followed me home was sitting at one of the computer desks. He looked up at me, and it really creeped me out. I tried my best not to look at him, but when I glanced back over, he was gone. I was really glad to see that soon it was 8 o'clock. I just hoped that the man had actually left the library. I went over and locked the doors like usual, then I went around the library to make sure everything was in order. Now, I had already done the announcements, such as, "The library is closing in 10 minutes," and "The library is now closed." Those announcements were made so if anybody was here, they knew that they were supposed to be gone by now. I went around the library, going up and down each aisle of bookshelves. Everything was empty, but when I approached the back corner of the library, I heard a noise. I looked over and saw that the same man was still here, and he was entering the aisle that I was in. My heart instantly started racing. I told the man that we were closed. He didn't answer me or say anything but kept approaching. I moved away and ran out of the aisle. I went to the next one over and heard the man coming after me. I then ran out of that aisle and quickly into another one, trying to confuse the man. I was able to stay ahead of him, going from one aisle to another like it was a maze. I heard footsteps in the distance but couldn't tell exactly where the man was. I then slowed down and tried to listen better. When I did, it seemed like he slowed down too. Very carefully, I moved out to another aisle. I needed to get to the front of the library where the doors were. I slowly moved over to the side wall and then went alongside it. I heard the man starting to approach, so I had to stop. I went around a corner into a little nook area where a comfortable chair was for reading. I went behind the chair and hid. The man walked closer but did not know exactly where I was, so he didn't go to the exact area but got within maybe 30 feet. He passed by and moved a little farther down from where I was. Then I carefully and quietly moved out from my hiding place. I walked back along the side wall until I could see the front doors. When I did, I started sprinting for them. When I did this, it gave away my location. The man started running after me, but he was a long way away. I made it to the doors and went outside. Then I got to my car, quickly went inside, and then watched the front doors. But the man did not leave. I called the police and waited there in my car. The police got there a short time later. They went inside and soon came out with the man. I was very grateful to have escaped. Looking back, I honestly don't know how I did it. I worked at that library for a few more months and then changed locations to where I currently work. Blean Library stood as a beacon of knowledge in the small town of Oxford. However, its history was marred by tragedy and mystery. Legend had it that the library was built upon cursed ground where restless spirits roamed the earth seeking vengeance. One fateful night, Luna, a dedicated librarian, found herself alone in the library after hours. As she went about her duties, she heard faint whispers echoing through the empty halls. Brushing it off as her imagination, she continued her work until the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, the books on the shelves began to fly off, pages fluttering in the air as if guided by an unseen force. Terrified, Luna fled to the safety of her office, only to find the door sealed shut by an unknown presence. Panic gripped her as she realized she was trapped inside the library with something malevolent. Desperate for answers, Luna delved into the library's archives, uncovering the dark history of Blean. Centuries ago, the land upon which the library stood had been cursed by a vengeful witch, cursing all who dared to trespass upon it. Determined to break the curse and free herself from the library's grip, Luna embarked on a perilous journey through the hidden chambers and secret passages of Bodleian. Along the way, she encountered the spirits of those who had perished within its walls, their anguished cries echoing in the darkness. At the heart of the library, Luna discovered the source of the curse, a forgotten tome bound in human flesh, its pages teeming with dark magic. With trembling hands, she began to recite the incantations inscribed within, hoping to banish the curse once and for all. As the final words left her lips, a blinding light enveloped the library, and Luna felt a sense of peace wash over her. When she opened her eyes, she found herself standing outside Blean Library, the curse broken and the spirits laid to rest. From that day forth, the library stood as a symbol of resilience and triumph, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of darkness. I used to work at the local public library when I was in my early 18s. I'd work the night shifts as my second job at least 4 times a week. After my first job, I'd get there at 5 o'clock and would work till closing time at 10 o'clock. I would also be the one to lock up the place after closing, but I wouldn't just leave right after the library closed. I'd have to shut off all the computers, do some cleaning and organizing, stock the shelves with all the returned books and DVDs from the day, take out the garbage, and only then could I leave. It was a Friday night approaching closing time. Most of the other library staff was gone already. It was just myself and one of the female librarians left. I had made a couple of last call announcements to the remaining library patrons, alerting them that the library would be closing soon. I was already cleaning up the place, trying to finish up early so I could leave and just start my weekend. The only other employee still there said goodbye to me as soon as the clock struck 10 o'clock. I announced on the intercom that the library was closed. The 2 guests that were left got up from their tables and started packing up their things before leaving through the door. After that, when I saw no one else in the building, I locked the front door. I proceeded to start fixing all the chairs to be neatly tucked under their tables. Then I started emptying all the garbage cans, and when it was time to bring them outside to the dumpster on the side, I unlocked the front door again and brought them out. It was quiet outside. The library was kind of tucked away from any main roads. When I came back inside, I locked the door again. Now all I had to do was restock all the returned books and DVDs from the day. I grabbed the 2 boxes and started with the DVDs, which was easier since the DVD section was smaller. It took about 5 to 10 minutes. During this time, I thought for sure I heard something come from one of the book aisles. I started walking through the aisles till I found an open book laying on the floor, which had clearly just fallen off the shelf. I put it back in its place, and for a second, I stood there and just wondered how that could have happened. I went back to work, and after finishing the DVDs, I took the box of books and started putting them one by one back on the shelves, going in alphabetical order. I started with the A's. The books in the box were sorted in alphabetical order to make it easy. As I worked my way down the shelves, trying to bang this out and go home, I heard another noise nearby. 2 times in less than 20 minutes. That was no coincidence. I set the box down and started walking through the aisles of books again. I found another 2 books on the ground in another aisle. Someone was in here. I walked out to the open area with all the tables and such and yelled out, "Excuse me, the library is closed." There was silence until I heard something from across the library from the children's section. I approached the noises, and it started to sound like some rabid animal making growling sounds. I also heard books being thrown onto the floor. It was coming from one aisle. As I built up the courage to peek down the aisle, I saw some woman wearing a nightgown throwing random books off the shelf, making these disgusting animal-like sounds. I didn't say anything. I turned and ran to the office where we had the phone. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. I locked the office door and closed the blinds to the window, then I called 911. I reported that there was some sickly woman in the library and I think they should send an ambulance. They asked if I had approached the woman, and I said no, she looked like she could be dangerous. When the operator asked me if the woman was still in the same spot, I opened the blinds and I screamed because that woman was right on the other side of the glass looking in. Her pupils were so big that she looked demonic. I said to the operator, "She's right outside the office." The woman started to bang on the glass, screaming gibberish. She tried opening the door, and when it didn't open, she turned around and sat on a chair facing the office. The operator asked me to keep the blind open and watch her. The woman was wobbly as she sat down, so I noted she was definitely high out of her mind. 2 police cars and an ambulance showed up to the library. The woman was put in handcuffs because she tried fighting the police officers, but nothing she was saying made any sense. She was put in the back of an ambulance and was taken away. I never found out what the hell she was on. I don't know how she got inside, maybe while I was taking the garbage out, or maybe she was inside before I even locked the place up. Either way, it definitely made being in the library alone after closing pretty unsettling from there on out. Osaka University boasted one of the most extensive library collections in the country, drawing scholars and students alike to its prestigious halls. Yet beneath its grandeur lay a dark secret that few dared to speak of. Rumors whispered of a hidden section of the library known as the Dark Night, where forbidden knowledge and ancient tomes were kept under lock and key. Curiosity led Karina, a freshman at Osaka, to seek out the elusive section despite warnings from her peers. Late one night, Karina ventured into the depths of the library, following a trail of flickering lights and echoing whispers. As she entered the dark night, she felt a chill run down her spine, the air thick with the scent of decay. Among the dusty shelves, Karina discovered a tome bound in black leather, its pages adorned with strange symbols and sigils. Ignoring the warnings etched into its cover, she began to read aloud from its pages, unaware of the dark forces she was about to unleash. Suddenly, the shadows around her began to stir, coalescing into sinister shapes that loomed over her like specters of the night. Terrified, Karina tried to flee but found herself trapped within the dark night, the walls closing in around her. Desperate for escape, Karina searched for a way out, stumbling upon a hidden chamber concealed behind a tapestry. Inside, she found a mirror adorned with ancient runes, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. With no other options left, Karina reached out and touched the mirror, hoping it would transport her to safety. To her astonishment, the mirror rippled like water, and she found herself standing outside Osaka University, the shadowed stacks disappearing into thin air behind her. Shaken but alive, Karina vowed never to speak of her harrowing ordeal, knowing that some secrets were better left buried in the darkness.